This is episode 184 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico podcast. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am pleased to be joined this week by Carol Wight of the New Mexico Restaurant Association. And Carol, I don't. No one needs to remind you just how crazy these times are for every business, let alone the industry that yet again finds itself at the tip of the spear in terms of public policy debates as well as issues relating to the coronavirus and being shut down, et cetera, et cetera. So, first and foremost, welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
And your organization, New Mexico Restaurant Association, is industry group representing restaurants here in New Mexico. Any other details you'd like to flesh out? I know there's a lot of different aspects to what you do.
We have 1,300 members throughout the state, and we actually serve all 3,500 restaurants in the state, whether they're members or not.
Excellent. And can you just kind of describe basically where things are at this point in terms of your industry here in New Mexico, across the country? It seems like most states are enacting similar policies to New Mexico, but as you see it, where do things stand?
So the interesting thing is that, restaurants notoriously don't make enough money, and they don't have a whole lot of money saved up. So, um, you know, right now I'm telling them you need to conserve as much cash as you can, because when we come back from this, you need to have enough to get inventory and your employees back. So there's been some relief from the federal government that we're trying to figure out how to tell them that they can get this relief and make it work for them at this point. But it's really hard when you don't know when we're going to open back up again. So most restaurants are closed. If you think about it, I mean, traditional sit-down restaurants are having a very hard time figuring out takeout. And like you said previously, when we weren't on camera, you said, you're trying to do as much as you can to support those. But no matter what we do, without 100% capacity, we just can't stay open. And so those restaurants that are traditionally have the drive up windows and all of that, those restaurants are doing fairly well. And I encourage people to go to those. I encourage you to go to the ones that are doing very interesting things with takeout and delivery and all sorts of things. I mean, we've got some restaurants out there that are being very, very creative, but they're doing it with not as much staff as they had before. So most of our employees are laid off right now. I would say, in restaurants, if you don't take the drive-through restaurants right now and you just take those sit-down restaurants, I would say probably more than half of the staff in those restaurants are laid off. And that's out of 96,000 employees. I'm saying about 30,000 of those that are on unemployment are probably restaurant employees.
Yeah, you have a fact sheet. Don't know if this is available on any websites or anything, but I'll just read the first line. It says, in New Mexico, the restaurant industry lost an estimated $123 million in sales and more than 15,000 jobs during the first 22 days of March. So those are pretty staggering figures right there. And I would note that, of course, along with those lost jobs, you also have lost tax revenues for government.
Yeah.
That includes not just payroll taxes and income taxes paid to those folks, but also gross receipts tax that the restaurant industry pays a lot of as well.
So, and you think about a lot of areas, a restaurant may be the only true business in that area that's paying any kind of gross receipts, because grocery stores don't pay gross receipts on the groceries. And so restaurants may be the only ones bringing in gross receipts, and there aren't any right now. I mean, the gross receipts for restaurants is very low just because they don't have any sales.
Right. Now, you mentioned restaurants. trying to stay open and offering takeout services. But that's obviously not the same. It's a very different business model. And, you know, I'm among everybody else that we're at home. If you're going to cook for yourself, the likelihood of cooking for yourself when you are at home all the time and you're not as busy traveling around, whether it's your job, sports, or ballet classes for the kids. Yes, I have three girls. You're just not going to have the same kind of thing. However, uh, again, before we got started here, I kind of quoted, turned the Obamacare line on its head. If you like your restaurant, and I mean especially local restaurants that you care about, but any restaurant that you really like to go to, this is the time to step up. It's not charity, but give back to them in their time of need by supporting them uh, by buying takeout and whatnot. So just talk about that whole situation and anything that people can do to find out who's open, who's not open, whatever information's available about how this is all working in this very crazy time.
So it's interesting, just things have been changing so quickly day by day, and we're just trying to keep up. So one of the things we did last week, somebody called me and said we'd like to do a website just to figure out what's open in New Mexico and where people can go. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a website called what'sopenNM.com, and you can go there and see what's open. But there's also, all of the radio stations, the TV stations, they've all got the same kind of thing. And I'm happy for anybody to go anywhere to find that information. Excuse me, because it is important that we support the restaurants that we care about.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are going to be closed right now, and maybe that's the best thing they could do. And I totally agree with that, right? I mean, you have to look at your business model and decide, is takeout going to work?
Mm-hmm.
Can we become a grocery store? Can we make this work for us? Um, so they have all made those decisions right now. And they're on this website or they aren't, but please, take the time, like you say, take the time and go out and get food. Now, one thing people are afraid, well, doesn't this mean that I'm going to be exposing myself to someone else? Remember, this is not a foodborne illness, so you can't catch it by eating the food. Now, if somebody touches something that if somebody has this virus, it can stay on a shiny surface for up to 8 hours. So you do need to be concerned about that. We have asked all restaurants that are doing any kind of service to the public to up and increase their protocols for cleaning and sanitation. And we
Mm-hmm.
believe they're doing that. So we feel that this is not only the right thing to do, but we feel that all of them are doing that to some degree.
All right. Well, that's good to know. And, we've definitely done some takeout from some of our favorite places that we go to as a family. Now, one of the things that you talked about the low margins of restaurants, but in general, what you hear a lot of is that liquor and alcohol sales are much higher margin activity. Now, that so even in the best of circumstances, say that somehow you're doing gangbusters takeout, uh, most restaurants are still losing out on significant revenues from that area. And then talk about the home delivery aspect of that and where that's been a debate in New Mexico in the legislature. Actually, legislation was vetoed by the governor, and you seem to think that that was a good idea. But let's work through all that and just
Sure.
in general, some of the issues with alcohol and you know they're essential stores now. So somebody I forget on the radio was saying, "Welcome to New Mexico, coronavirus. The schools are not considered essential, but liquor stores are. Hey, whatever we got to do to get through this time, right?"
Actually, believe it was the governor of Colorado said that they were going to close down the liquor stores, and he did that for about an
And I
hour.
believe the pot shops too.
And the pot shops, that's right. Yeah, he did that for about an hour and came back and said, "Wait, no,
This is
that's
where
not."
the restaurant association and the marijuana industry join hands in a giant hug, and
And say,
we're going to
"Wait."
stimulate demand, right?
Yeah. So we are pushing the governor, and probably about 30 other states have done this, allowed for takeout and delivery of liquor during these times. Basically, I mean, basically, it helps the restaurants, like you said. There's higher margins in liquor,
Mm-hmm.
and we really need those margins. We also have all kinds of inventory that we need to deliver, get
Mm-hmm.
rid of,
Right.
and
Thankfully, liquor stays pretty long.
right. Well,
Some would say it even gets better with age.
some does, but not all. Um, so so we don't see it as a problem. There was a bill a couple of years ago, and it got all the way through the House and the Senate.
Must have been 2019 because it was Michelle Lujan Grisham who vetoed it, as I recall.
Interesting. Okay, I'm not remembering it that way, but could it have been her first year?
Yeah, I mean, she's only had two
Yeah.
sessions, so yeah,
So
2019.
so and what it did was it allowed the third party delivery guys to go pick up liquor from a liquor store and deliver it, and they don't have any liability in that. And so what you know
You're talking about like Uber Eats or DoorDash or one of those
right,
groups. Okay.
right, so that it would allow them to go buy liquor from a liquor
Oh,
retailer
okay.
and then turn around and sell it. And it didn't make sense. It was not how our laws are set up.
But we are
So
limited in New Mexico in terms of a restaurant having a bottle of wine that
mhm.
they sell, through an Italian restaurant, just say, uh, that's not viable in New Mexico currently, and you're hoping to change that. So
Right, right.
that
You cannot take out. So with a caveat, so there is the restaurant to go. So if you open a bottle of wine and you cannot finish it, you can recork it. So it's called the recorking. You recork it, put it in a sealed bag, and then you can take it out with you. But that's the only way liquor is ever allowed to go out of a uh, restaurant.
so the Uber driver has to take a shot first, and then they can deliver. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah. No, as a matter of fact, I had somebody say, "Can we just pour out a little wine and then send it in a doggy
For my
bag?"
homies.
And no, it's not legal yet. So we're just asking the governor for a little bit of leeway here. Let's allow this to be done now. We'll figure out. We have the rules put in place. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we basically have a set of rules that we got from Colorado, and Colorado goes probably a step too far in that they allow mixed drinks to go.
Oh,
So yeah, they're. I mean, just kind of it's a free for all up there, and we're not asking for that. We're asking for things that are in cans and bottles and those kind of things to be able to be delivered.
boxes. Sorry.
No,
Okay. Just
most
sort of
restaurants
joking.
most restaurants don't have access to boxed wines and
Oh,
things.
man.
Yeah, sorry.
I hang out at the wrong restaurants, I guess. Uh, okay. Well, you know, just to kind of put the cherry on top of that discussion, obviously you want that to be done through the emergency powers currently. Presume that that's something you'd like to see done legislatively at as a more permanent thing as well, right?
Yes, I mean, I do think there's the right way to do that, and I think we're coming up with the rules around that to where legislatively we think it would be good. But right now, the governor and the Alcohol and Beverage Control Department have said that they don't believe that the governor can do this because she doesn't have the power without the legislature to do it. Now, she's making a lot of other decisions, and it seems like every other governor has given themselves the power. So I think she would be forgiven, and I can't imagine we put her in jail for that. But still, she's waiting for a special session for this to happen. And in the meantime, we're watching restaurants
Well,
that will never open again.
yeah, and that's very tragic. I mean, restaurants, when you think about it, I mean, they're such a um, to use a nice disease term, but in a good way, a vector. They are a vector for our culture. They are a way of spreading New Mexico culture, which there's no more explicit way of expressing culture than within food, and restaurants are a great way of exposing people and indoctrinating them, I guess, into New Mexican culture.
And
But
if you think about it, New Mexico is one of the very few places, probably New Orleans is one of the only other ones that has our own food.
right,
I mean, you can't step outside of our borders and find the same food that you find inside New Mexico.
yes,
So,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Thankfully, we didn't have the same. I mean, I think Mardi Gras seems like a marvelous time, but unfortunately, this particular Mardi Gras was right
Oh,
smack dab in the middle of kind of the beginning stages of this whole process of spreading the coronavirus around. And I think uh, that that could be a permanent change. I mean, not that they're going to cancel Mardi Gras, but boy, different state, different challenge. But let's talk about the special session or the potential for one. Obviously, we're working from a position of this disease, this issue doesn't really allow for the kind of meetings in Santa Fe that need to happen in order for a special session to be held. Republicans are pushing for one sooner than later, whatever that means, which we don't really know at this point. You know, the governor, and I agree with you. I think you asked for you do the policy, especially if it's something that's good common sense policy, and ask for forgiveness later. Um, where do you see things in terms of state issues? Obviously, we've seen the federal bailout passed, but uh, at the state level, are they going to be doing anything for these laid off workers? Are there going to be, aside from the federal uh, bailout that was passed, are there going to be policies that you're going to want out of Santa Fe governor or legislature to help this industry make it through this very difficult time?
so the federal bailout is really going to help our employees. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, to the point that they're going to be making more on unemployment than they are with us, and that's kind of a problem
Probably a
because,
bad policy.
yeah, probably not a great policy. But then again, you know what? More power to them if they, get on your feet while you're, you know, while you can on unemployment, and then come back to the restaurant when we can hire you back.
Yeah.
Um, the rest of it, about a special session, we were being told that many things could not be decided without a special session. Unemployment law, there was the whole question of, are the rates going to be mutualized across all accounts, or is every account going to get hit with all of the layoffs they have
You're talking
now?
about unemployment insurance, right?
Unemployment
Yeah.
insurance. So we were told that they weren't going to, it was going to take a special session. They couldn't make that decision. They did make the decision that that they were going to mutualize the all of the unemployment over all of the accounts.
Tell us what that means, because not everybody
So
understands what
basically,
mutualize.
if you have an unemployment claim, it goes against your account,
Mm-hmm.
and it just means that you're not as good of an employer as you could be. Therefore, people are leaving you. so so um, if you think about it, all of these layoffs that are happening in restaurants would hit their accounts individually,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it could be devastating for a business. And as a matter of fact, in the end, we would basically say you guys need to claim bankruptcy and come back. But
You're talking
so
about each individual business.
each individual business gets hit with all of their unemployment claims. So in this case, it's going to be mutualized over every account in the unemployment account, and therefore it's not going to hit any one industry or any one business particularly, but it will hit all of us
Mm.
as businesses in New Mexico. Don't know if that makes sense.
Well,
If you pay
I,
unemployment,
I, I, no, I get what you're saying. I mean, I guess if you're a different kind of business, and I know this, you represent one specific
you bet
industry,
it.
and there's relatively high turnover in the best of days with regard to restaurants. Uh, if we don't come up with some system to address this issue, because it's going to affect all businesses, obviously, again, tip of the spear, restaurants, uh, will there be some kind of mechanism at the state level so that businesses can deal with this unemployment insurance problem. And are you, by having so many restaurant employees laid off, and then kind of putting that into the whole system, is that unfairly, do you think, objectively hitting businesses that are able to keep their staff on the payroll or not? Describe that whole process as
So
you see it.
if it was something that we as an industry were doing to ourselves to make this happen, I would say
Fair enough.
yes, then let's not mutualize this, then let's make the industry take that hit.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not something we're doing to ourselves,
Right.
right? This is something that somebody said we had to do. The other thing is I do believe, and I'm not sure if it was in this last package, but I do believe that the federal government will bail out the unemployment insurance. And so and also, if you remember, and you may or may not, but back in 2008, in
Mm-hmm.
the recession, coming out of the recession, we had depleted our account, our
Mm-hmm.
unemployment account at the state level. And so employers were having to pay these exorbitant prices for every time somebody claimed unemployment. Um, we're going to try to keep from doing that. And again, by mutualizing this, it goes across all unemployment accounts.
Okay. Well, that is good to know, and I think there's definitely uh,
So the other point to that is that the
right.
governor made that decision, but she won't make the decision about alcohol, and that kind of makes me mad.
Right.
I mean, that's a good decision on behalf of all
Mm-hmm.
employers.
So kudos to her for doing that, but
Kudos, yeah.
also the and there's a lot going on, and uh, there's definitely criticisms that she has been overly aggressive with certain of her powers, and I'm sure some of the folks in the industry are less than thrilled that they're being told to shut down and have so little control over their own business, and that's a reality of the situation right now.
I haven't been hearing that so much. I mean, people get that we all have to do our fair share in this. Again, like you say, we're the tip of the spear. So this is it's going to trickle down into other industries as well. Our industry has just hit fast and hard on this.
Mm-hmm.
I think, unfortunately, the longer it goes, the more restaurants we're going to see close permanently because they won't be able to come back from it.
Do you have any like educated guess in terms of where where that whole discussion might wind up? 5% of restaurants, 10% of restaurants, like the financial aspects of the industry. Uh, so what's kind of the damage that we're looking at?
So what I'm hearing is that there's 3% of restaurants that are not in going to come back from this right now.
Okay.
And for I think it's every month this goes on, there's going to be an equal, at least 3 to 6 to 5. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
gets exponential after a while, just because I think there's restaurants that are trying to hang on, but they're using all of their available cash in order to do that.
Yeah, that's got to be a big challenge for those folks who own the restaurants and just have no choice at this point. So a related issue, more at the local level, and I know you worked very hard in the city council here, but also Bernalillo County has a plastic bag ban. Now, you were very effective in getting the city to pull out the restaurant containers and clamshells and even plastic bags from restaurants. Uh, I know you're not maybe an expert on that whole situation as a vector for spread of viruses, but uh, is that a silver lining? Do you think we might just see a
So
dumping of
that is
those?
so that is one of the things that we told our city council and county commissioners,
Mm-hmm.
that we would like to keep plastic bags because they are safe and sanitary.
Mm-hmm.
And sanitation is something that's so important to us that you can't have somebody bringing in their dirty old bags that they've had raw meat in and put your food in it. So So we did get restaurants carved out of the Albuquerque ban. We did not manage that at the city council. If you remember, they were also working,
County Commission,
county commission, excuse me.
Bernalillo County.
Yeah, they were also working on the sick leave at the same time.
Right.
And we felt like it was more important that we get some concessions on the sick leave than on the plastic bags. So I think, I mean, number one, is that sanitation from restaurants. You
Mm-hmm.
just have to have it. You can't have restaurants. And and I don't know about you, but now that we have these big thick plastic bags that everybody's giving out, they're no more reusable than anything else. So it's driving everybody
Don't
crazy.
worry. The mayor has said he giveth with one hand and taketh away with the other, because in the mayor's announcement, Tim Keller said, "Yeah, we're giving you 30 days. It has nothing to do with health," and he made that very clear. Oh yeah, his announcement he said it was in solidarity with grocery workers because of course restaurants are already pulled out, but yeah, solidarity with grocery workers, and that after 30 days they were going to also include the 225ths of a millimeter plastic bags that have been distributed at grocery stores and other stores, that they were going to get rid of those as well. Because Pat Davis had been talking about that earlier this month. And then I had the op ed in the Journal just trashing Davis for his tone deafness and bad policy implications. But ultimately, it's really the county at this point that I think you have more work to do in terms of. It looks like they may go and give a temporary exemption, but they really need to pull restaurants out as well, and that might be a easier discussion to have now than it would have been before.
Yes. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your work on it too, because it's just nice to see your face in most of these places
Oh,
where I am, where we're fighting the good fight, and I appreciate that, and I mean, these counselors need to start listening to the people in the know. I mean, the people who have the knowledge. They keep listening to I don't know, the kids in kindergarten.
yeah,
That's who we were up against in the plastic bag ban, and I love these kids. They were darling, but they didn't have real knowledge.
yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. Well, you mentioned sick leave. That's obviously taken on a little bit of a new importance these days, and I know that there will be an opportunity for policymakers locally as well as at the state level to push on the sick leave issue in a more aggressive way. Maybe not during the crisis, but certainly you can see
The writing on
you
the
can,
wall.
yeah, the writing on the wall. In the Rio Grande Foundation, we came out in a posting that I made recently and said, yeah, during a declared health emergency, we're fine with having mandatory paid sick leave. But you just cited all of these sad, truly sad economic statistics about these predominantly small family-owned restaurants. Mandatory paid sick leave, especially implemented on a year-round basis, is not going to help those guys come back or stay in business.
No, that would be the death of them. And even the federal bill that mandates paid sick leave, um, with the federal government paying it back on a quarterly basis, honestly, if you look at that and you figure that most of your employees could apply for that because they're out of work because of coronavirus, um, then you have to wonder. I mean, how do these restaurants that have very little cash, very little money, how do they come back from something like that and wait 3 months to get payment for it? They can't. They don't have the cash on hand to pay up front for sick leave. You know,
So mandatory paid sick leave in some form was included in the federal bailout bill.
the first federal bailout bill
Oh, the
was called
original
sick
one.
leave. Yeah,
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 no,
yeah,
I remember that, but
yeah.
that was amended out of the process, and as I recall, no, or
No,
is it in
no,
the final bill?
it's in the final.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
it's in the final first relief bill that came
okay,
out, and it goes into effect April 1st. So on Wednesday, this goes into effect, And employers need to know this because if you still have employees around, you need to know there's a poster you've got to post. It's on our website, nmrestaurants.org. On our coronavirus page, there's a poster you have to post if you have less than 500, yeah, less than 500 employees.
Mhm.
And basically, it says that your employees are entitled to this sick leave up to, and I'm going to get it wrong if I try to quote it, but
So it's a quarterly thing, and you have employees that will need that sick leave at some point during a quarter, and then the restaurant or business will have to pay for it, but they will be reimbursed by the federal government after that quarter, presumably at some point.
yes, and we don't even have the paperwork to know how we apply for the money.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing out there so far, so it's a bit of a shell game right now. I mean, we're just trying to find the nut under the shells,
And
right?
this is a permanent thing, presumably moving forward. This is not a in a time of health crisis or.
This is the COVID. This is just for
Oh, okay,
coronavirus. Yeah,
okay,
yeah. It's not, and it's not a mandate other than for coronavirus.
okay.
And so, if your employees are sick for any other reason, they don't get paid for it.
Got it. Well, that's important to have those discussions and clarify all that.
Right.
Now, you are the New Mexico Restaurant Association. I know Albuquerque and the metro area, et cetera, here central to the state is an important part of that. But hey, let's face it, restaurants are beneficiaries of strong economic growth. They're beneficiaries of the oil and gas industry, and the guys working on the rigs and various other folks involved in that industry come back and they spend money and support restaurants, especially in southeast New Mexico, in the Permian Basin and whatnot. And broadly speaking, New Mexico is going to be behind the proverbial economic slash budgetary eight ball in a way that we've never seen before. What I don't know that there is an answer, but are you talking to folks down in those areas of the state, and what are they seeing?
So, yes and no. I mean, right now they're still seeing quite a bit of customers coming in. I mean, they're not seeing a big layoff
Mm-hmm.
necessarily of the oil and gas. I think that's coming, and I think it's really imperative that the legislature get back to business and relook at the budgeting that they did because it doesn't make any sense anymore. Um, this is going to make 2008 look like it was a cakewalk,
Mm-hmm.
and that's my prediction is that it just is because we've got so many people out of work immediately taking advantage of the unemployment, but then you have on top of that, I mean, it's just piled on and piled on. You've got the oil and gas going down and not having that income. So we can only hope really that
Mm-hmm.
oil and gas comes back before the end of the year, and that we're not really looking at some of these just devastating numbers for our state budget.
Yeah, as we record this, the price of a barrel of oil hovers just above $20 a barrel. Um, I hate to be the bearer of what I think is going to be bad news for New Mexico ultimately. I just don't see oil and gas bouncing back in any significant way. We've been dealing with an overhang of supply for a long time,
Yeah.
and the Russians and Saudis just kind of threw up their hands and said, well, let's metaphorically go to war in terms of getting their prices down, pushing American producers out. And the producers down in the Permian Basin need about $40 a barrel, so about
In
double
order
where
to
we
hang
are
on,
in
right?
order just to break even. And you know, it may not be right now that they're seeing the real problems yet, but it's definitely coming, and that's going to filter in through New Mexico's entire budget, and uh, it's going to be very, very interesting. I think a lot of people, including myself, have definitely criticized our governor and the legislature for their mismanagement of the good days.
Yeah.
We're all hoping, though, that the bad days, which pretty much started March 1st, that whole process goes a little bit better. Uh, Anything else? Any other topics that we've missed? I know restaurants are so diverse, and each one of them is really unique, and they're dealing with some of the same issues right now here in New Mexico. Anything else we're missing? Because a lot of important issues out there.
There's a lot of important issues, and I would say that if you know anybody in the restaurant business, they need to be watching the things that we're putting out right now. And again, we're putting out so much information that it's too much. It's an
Mm-hmm.
overload. And so that's why we're having daily calls with our members every day at 3 o'clock. We have a call. And if somebody knows a restaurant out there, they need to be on this call because they need to know what to do. A lot of people are getting misinformation, and I'm just worried about what's going to happen to them if that continues.
Hmm. 3 o'clock, nice between the lunch, theoretical lunch rush and
Yeah,
the dinner rush.
anymore.
Yeah. So, it's just such a challenge right now because until, as I'm sure you appreciate this stimulus package that just passed, until you can actually do the things that you want to do with your life, whether it's going to work, socializing, traveling, any of these things, you can throw money at people, but they really can't spend it in any way, shape, or form. For example, my daughter and I, we were planning on going to New York City
Oh,
for a daddy daughter spring break, just tour New York kind of thing. And, of course, New York, part of what you do in New York is you eat unique things. And she'd
oh
seen all the
yeah.
Food Network videos and,
And
uh,
theater and
yeah,
yeah.
well, we weren't, that nothing was playing that was appropriate for a 7 year old that, uh, we would have wanted to go to, but the Freedom Tower and the Statue of Liberty, and there's a lot of New York restaurants, especially, and that whole aspect of the industry and tourism. I mean, when you go to New Mexico, and we have speakers come to New Mexico, they say, "Let's go have New Mexican food," and that's another, I guess, side aspect of this whole thing. That just the decline in tourism and how is that whole process going to work and come back, because that's a big reason that restaurants exist and have customers.
Well, and I it is a big reason, and conferences and everything else. So, when conferences started closing down and our message to them was, okay, don't don't um just postpone.
Mm-hmm.
Don't cancel, postpone, right? So just let us know that you're going to do this at a later date, and we'll let you have that date. And partially that's because we need the business. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
think about the convention center. I mean, they had I think hundreds of thousands of dollars in conferences booked.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had to not do that. They had the food bought in some cases. So, I mean, it's just devastating to the entire industry and travel. And I really believe that it's going to come back very last. So, and it could either be by edict or just by people not wanting to go out and be
Mm-hmm.
with those other folks. So I think that restaurants are going to come back last because it is a place where you're going to not be able to keep that 6 foot
Mm-hmm.
distance necessarily. And travel and tourism is gonna be hit for quite a long time.
Now, just when you think tourism in New Mexico, of course you think balloon fiesta. Who makes the final decision on that? I mean, you hope this whole situation is in hand by early October, but I mean, that's another huge issue. I forget the exact numbers. I know they had a big study that came out that talked about the economic impact of the balloon fiesta. And,
Yeah.
as somebody who studies these issues for a living, I think it's fair to say that in the Albuquerque metro area, there is no single more driving of tourism and restaurants and whatnot than the balloon fiesta. Is that something you're party to? Are you part of any of those conversations? Uh, can you wave a flag and say, please don't cancel until the very last minute? I mean, ballooning is not exactly the best for social distancing, but it's not the worst either.
Right. Well, you know, that's for somebody above my pay grade to
Right.
make those decisions, and I'm glad it is. And hopefully, we'll be through this by then. I mean, I would think that we'll be through it, and people will want to travel. They'll be ready. There's going to be a lot of pent up anxiety over people wanting to get out. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, right now we're getting a little tired of our families. Yeah,
Yeah, well, we love them, but
we love them, but 24/7 is more than we bargained for when we had them. So, so I just want to say, I think it's going to come back. It's going to come back very slowly, especially for restaurants. I think other parts of of industries will come back before restaurants do, and that's just because there's a lot of people packed into one place.
yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your expertise and knowledge. We are truly all in this together, and we're going to do what we can to help businesses, especially restaurants that we want to see there after the crisis, and businesses that are near and dear to us. And I think that is a very important thing you can do that's in their best interest and your best interest, et cetera. And as things develop, we'll keep the conversation open. So thanks for listening to this week's podcast. Make sure to get the latest edition of Tipping Point New Mexico by subscribing at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. You can post or comment on this and other episodes on Facebook and Twitter, and tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.